and welcome to the preview for the New Works Bold Voices Lab. I'm John Spencer. I'm the repetiteur and cover conductor for the New Works Bold Voices Lab this season. It's my first season at Opera Theater of St. Louis, and I'm really excited to be here. The New Works Bold Voices Lab this season consists of 3 short chamber operas that are performed in one evening. The first of these is called On the Edge and was written by Laura Karpman and Tara Stinson. Laura Karpman, the composer, has written prolifically for film, television, video games, the concert hall, the theater, and here she dives into her first fully staged opera production. This piece offers 3 progressive pictures of pandemic life, starting in April of 2020, continuing with May, and then ending with June of 2020, a period which we're all extremely familiar with at this time. And here in this piece, we look at the realities of raising children during this period, the stress, the challenges, but it's also chock full of humor and a lot of fun. The opening bars, which is the music I just played, represent the dinging of the cell phone of the single mother in the first piece. She has 48 messages, and immediately we're thrown into the zany and stressful world of trying to raise children during the transition to home learning and the lockdown. The relentlessness of that music immediately throws us into this world. One of my favorite moments in the first part is when one of the teachers sends home the music to Fauré's Après un rêve, which is a famous song that even if you don't know it, you might recognize the music. We hear the accompaniment in the piano and the melody played by a violin in the orchestra, but to represent one of the children trying to practice and learn how to play the violin. It sounds a little like this. We hear the beauty of the accompaniment in the orchestra, but also the very rhythmically and tonally challenged sound of the daughter trying to practice. And then over top, the mother is exasperated having to listen to this without end all day long at home. In the May section of our piece, we're obviously 1 month later, and we see how things have changed. Karpman throws us into a totally new world. Each of the characters introduces their own motive in the beginning. Zoom, 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 zoom. And now the second character. Getting fat, fat, getting fat, fat, getting fat, fat, getting fat, fat. And then finally, the last character. It goes on and on. It goes on and on. Immediately, we have this very humorous world of being stuck at home and bored, and the fact that it's never going to end, or at least it feels like it will never end. This little musical ensemble bookends the May section of our piece. It starts here at the beginning and then ends at the end, transitioning us to the final picture, June, which is the most serious of the 3. We've arrived at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. We have a look at how families address these issues and try to explain societal and systemic injustices to their children. The music has a more simple rhythmic structure, and the words are able to shine out on top in the melody that the singers sing. At the climax of the piece, everyone sings and repeats the text, "Hold on," as we wait not simply for the end of the pandemic, but also hopefully for justice and real change in America. The second piece of the evening is called Moon Tea and was written by composer Stephen Mackey and librettist Rinde Eckhardt. Stephen Mackey is a Grammy Award-winning composer. He's a professor at Princeton University, and his compositions have been played by the major orchestras of the world, including Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, the BBC in London, Tokyo, and of course right here, by the St. Louis Symphony as well. The setting of our piece is the afternoon tea meeting hosted by Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, and attended by Neil Armstrong, his wife Janet Armstrong, and Captain Michael Collins of the moon landing mission. We have in this piece a brief look into the dreams, the desires, and the internal dialogues of these larger-than-life, not just characters, but real-life people who are larger than life. Stephen Mackey has used some really fascinating and unusual musical effects in his piece to create a unique otherworldliness as the musical backdrop. One of these techniques he uses are called quarter tones. In the normal scale that we're all accustomed to hearing, we have 12 tones. And then we start over again and go up from there, always 12 tones. These quarter tones are pitches that exist between two of these notes that we are already accustomed to hearing. For example, between C and C sharp is a quarter tone. So when these play, our ear immediately thinks we're hearing something very strange, something from another world. And this effectively brings us into outer space, as if we're imagining being on the moon. Another interesting instrument he uses is called the Flexitone. It's a percussion instrument that is able to play a pitch on a small metal plate. And then you can manipulate the metal plate so that the pitch bends. And actually you can play infinite number of pitches throughout the scale. This again contributes to a total otherworldliness, outer space sound world. The piece is divided into 5 scenes. And in the first scene, we have an orchestral introduction which uses these techniques to bring us into this world. And it leads into an aria sung by Prince Philip. He imagines himself in space, dreaming of not just being the handmaid of history, as he says, but a man of science and adventure and a leader by himself. Stephen Mackey also assigns small motivic elements to each character in this piece. And in each scene, they introduce them and sing them. Prince Philip's is a very short and simple figure. It's just the 2 notes, but he sings in a few different keys. But it remains always the same. What Stephen Mackey does with these as he introduces them is he then brings them back in the final scene when all the characters come together. So in scene 2, we have Neil Armstrong and Janet Armstrong alone in their hotel room preparing to leave for the tea. Neil has a cold and he's completely nervous and agitated and thinks that they have to cancel. He cannot go. He's so sick. He sings a rhythmically jagged figure to represent his nervousness. Janet, on the other hand, is completely ignoring her husband as she dreams of being best friends with the Queen, that Queen Elizabeth would surely, after this meeting, invite her to be best friends and they could go places and enjoy themselves. Surely the Queen would want to have a friend who's outside of her normal circles. So she sings music that's very dreamy and has nothing to do whatsoever with Neil's music. So Neil sings in 3/4 time, it's written, which normally we associate with a waltz. Very simple kind of rhythmic structure. But he's sneezing and sick and agitated, as I said, and so he is sneezing in the music and then has this jagged rhythmic structure against it. Ah-choo, ah-choo, we have to call it off. It goes against the normal 3/4 time feeling. Janet, on the other hand, has her dreamy melody. Again, these motives will come back in the final scene and be developed by Mackey. In the 3rd scene, Queen Elizabeth sings a beautiful aria and imagines herself being weightless and without gravity on the moon, where she can't be weighed down by her crown, both in the literal and the figurative sense. However, she's introduced by a kind of Baroque fanfare. This fanfare will also come back in the final scene and be the kind of musical culmination of the final ensemble. In the fourth scene, Captain Michael Collins breaks a vase upon entering the Buckingham Palace, and we immediately recognize how awkward and nervous his energy is, and he's appalled at his own behavior for having broken this vase entering the palace. He has again a very complicated rhythmic structure, and at the end of his scene, a very fast, long, and virtuosic patter section with lots of text quickly spoken. In the final scene, scene 5, we have the culmination of all the musical motives that were introduced in the first scenes. Mackie interweaves these little melodic pieces and develops them until they climax in the end of the scene. Collins, who was too nervous and upset to introduce his own motive in his scene, introduces a new theme, which begins with a text, "One small step." I imagine you can figure out where I'm going with this. And the melody goes like this. Mackie takes this little piece, the very beginning of it, and develops it into a long melody, which all 5 characters sing together at the climax of the ensemble. The text they sing, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind." The Queen's fanfare returns as they all go off to enjoy their after-moon tea. The final piece of our evening is called "The Tongue and the Lash" and is written by composer Damien Sneed and librettist Karen Chilton. Sneed is a prolific composer. He's a pianist, a conductor, an arranger, and a singer, and he's written across many styles and genres. His recent operatic credits include a piece called "Marian's Song," which was written about the famous opera singer Marian Anderson, and premiered at the Houston Grand Opera, where Sneed was also a composer in residence for one season. This piece is a look at an intense discussion about racial injustice at an historical moment. The opera imagines a dialogue between James Baldwin and William Buckley, following their famous and history-making debate at the University of Cambridge in 1965. This debate you can actually still watch on YouTube, and I highly recommend before you come to see these pieces live. It's a fascinating, fascinating debate. And the opera begins at the end of this debate, and the adjudicator announces Baldwin's victory over Buckley, and then we have the beginning of our imagined dialogue between the two. For the first and largest section of the discussion, Sneed has written a ostinato part in the orchestra, which is both rhythmical and active enough to suggest a tension between the two and maintain this tension, but also is able to sit in the background a little bit so that the words and the singing really come to the forefront. The ostinato goes like this. This ostinato continues as the tensions rise and their discussion continues as well. I think this opera really speaks extremely well for itself, and the weight of the piece becomes very quickly apparent to us. We realize that the conversation between these two then remains much the same as it is today. The progress we've made is not enough, and there remains still so much to rectify and solve in our society. But after a moving aria by Baldwin sung in gospel style, and in a fantastically written musical culmination, Baldwin declares optimistically, "But dear God, my heart beats on faith." And the orchestra triumphantly plays us out. of the interesting parts of working on a world premiere piece is that we get to work live with the composers. Normally we're presenting pieces by composers who are dead, and we have no reference except the notes on our page on how to create the work and how to present it to the audience. In this case, we still have the notes, but we also have the composer who can give us perspective. He can give us notes. He can tell us how to change things. That gives our job a certain sense of immediacy. We have the ability to receive feedback from the composer, and he can guide us in the right direction, or she can offer us notes about certain things that we should change. These pieces are also evolving as we work on them. For example, for Damien Sneed's piece, we received a new version just a few weeks ago before beginning the rehearsals. So we have to be flexible in a way that's totally unique to this process and different from working on our normal traditional repertoire. I personally am very excited and to have received all the feedback from the composers, and they will continue to provide their feedback as we finish our rehearsal process. And I'm really looking forward to welcoming them in person live here in St. Louis for the opening night of the New Works Bold Voices Lab. Thank you so much for joining me for this preview. We look forward to welcoming you to the outdoor festival season, and especially to the performances of the New Works Bold Voices Lab. Thank you.